looking at our hero component here, how might we approach styling this up using a combination of what we have in tachyons, those little CSS classes that we can add to help us along, in combination with our own CSS. So what we have first off is this full height element that's going to take up all the available height inside the browser viewport. So that viewable area that you see inside the browser, we want it to take up the full width and height. Also, the background image, we want it to cover that entire background. And inside of there, we have this box that contains our heading, our subheading, and a date. And that's centered in the middle vertically and horizontally, with the text aligned in the center. So if we go into tachyons, in the documentation, there is an area here for heights. Now there's various different ways we can apply heights to elements using tachyons. It has an inbuilt height scale, which starts at H1, goes up to H5. You can also do them as percentages. But what we're interested in is this here. So this min VH 100. So looking at our example here, our really terrible looking code, how might we apply that onto what we have? So where we have this section with a class of hero, I'm going to put this onto the side. So if you press these three dots, you can dock it to the right, you can dock it to the bottom or to the left, depending on what fits your screen the best. I'm going to dock mine onto the right, and let's actually do that and zoom in a bit. So hopefully you should be able to see this clearly from your side. What we want to do on this hero section is to add a class of min VH, which stands for viewport height, and then 100. And you can see now it has picked up this style from tachyons. So we apply these class names and we can now build up some functionality. So that's step one done. We have something that is the same height as our viewport. Now with this background, how do we get that so it is centered in the middle and covering the full width and height? Well, we're going to look at things that are related to the background. So background size, and we have some options here. So we have cover, and that is going to apply a background size cover to the element. So if we add a class of cover on here as well, you can see it's now covering the available space. Now to also figure out background position, we want to do a class of BG center. So if you go into the table of properties or the table of styles, you can just do a search through for the particular thing you want to do. In this case, we want to center the background as well. So let's do BG center. That's looking good. And this content itself, we currently can't see that. So we need to figure out what's going on there. But essentially, we want to get this content so it's sitting in the middle of this box. So to do that, we can use Flexbox. And you guessed it, Flexbox has some helpers built into tachyons as well. So by applying a class of flex onto an element, it will apply Flexbox. And we can do some things with alignment as well. So if we want to align our items in the center, it says align item center, we use the class of item center. If we want to justify the content, so to align it horizontally in the center, we can use justify center. So let's add those on there as well. You're going to get a feel for this, how we sort of build up many different class names. So we can do flex, item center, and justify center. And you can see that hero content is now sitting in the middle there. Currently doesn't have any style. We haven't given it any typographic style just yet. But this is a good starting point. We've achieved a full width and height background image. We've centered it. We've made it cover the background as well. We've used Flexbox and centered the items. And all we've had to do to achieve that is to write some class names onto our element. So this is the idea of how Tachyons works. We build up styles for our components by just using lots of different class names to achieve what we want. So I'm going to copy these things over to our HTML. I can remove this blue background. We don't want that in there. And where we have our section with the class of hero, we're going to do min vh100. What else do we have? Cover. So it's going to cover the background. We're going to center that background. We are going to use Flexbox. We'll put the items in the center. And we're going to justify the content in the center as well. Cool. So looking at this text now, what do we have going on there? We have some very large, bold text here and a subheading which uses a different font. So it uses this Tenor Sans. The main heading uses this Archivo Black. And the date down here is a lot smaller and using this Archivo Black as well, with a big space in between those two things there. This text is also centered in the middle and it uses the color white. So how might we approach this using tachyons? Well, currently we have all of our content grouped together in this hero content element. And we got our H1, our paragraph, and another paragraph there. So on our hero content, we could add a class of white. It would make the text white for us. We can add a class of TC. So just like we were used to in our example here, when we use TC, it's text center. It aligns the text in the center. And on the H1, what we could do there is to add some class names. So if we say class, what classes do we want? So we're going to say class is going to be equal to, and just to start off with, we're going to make it bold. We'll remove all the margins. So margin, all sides are going to be 0. We're going to use TTU. So I'll explain what that does in a sec. But essentially we have uppercase text for all of these different parts. So using TTU, text transform uppercase, and I could find this out by going into text transform, and we can do text transform uppercase, lowercase, and capitalized. What else do we want to do here? That pretty much is it. So the typography, the actual fonts themselves, we're going to worry about in our next video. Purely what we're going to do in this video is to get the sizing and the spacing organized. So the last thing here is the font size itself. Now this font size is 64 pixels. If I go into the type scale on Tachyons, they have this type scale here, but there is no unit for 64 pixels. So I'm just going to write that in as my own custom class. So we're going to call this hero heading, and we'll add a class for that. You've got to remember later on we need to add this stuff back into our HTML. So hero heading, font size is going to be 64 pixels, nice and big like that, and that's looking good. So for our paragraph below, where it has the subheading, let's add an attribute there. So we'll say p class. We're going to do some similar things again. We are going to put some margin on the bottom of 6. So we're going to use a very big margin. We're going to put a margin on the top of 0. So you get the idea here. If we do ML0, it will do margin left 0. If we do MV0, it will do it vertically. These are things we'll get a feel for as we go along. The idea here is we do a margin bottom of 6 units and a margin top of 0 units. What else are we going to do? We're going to make it white, and we're going to make it uppercase as well. So text transform uppercase. In addition to that, we need to also make the font size big for this subheading. So it's 64 pixels again. So we can give this a class. Let's give it a separate class of hero subheading, or just subhead. And for that, we will apply a little rule, p subhead. What are we going to do? We're going to make the font size 64 pixels. And you can see this coming together for us ever so slightly. Now, lastly, on our paragraph at the end for our date, if we look at that, we have this kind of smaller, bold, uppercase text as well. So for that, we can do a pretty similar thing to what we have just done already. So if I add an attribute here, what am I going to add? A class. And I'm going to do a font size of 6. So at the smaller end of the type scale. So if we go in here, we have F6. This is the nice small size. I'm going to make it bold, uppercase, white, uppercase, and I'm going to remove the margins as well. So I'll say M0 or MA0. So you can see it's picking up all these different class names here. We don't need to go into our CSS and actually write too much. The only things that we need to write in our CSS will be for this hero subhead and this hero heading. Beyond that, it's just using tachyons to apply the classes to build up these styles. Now, this will feel a bit alien at first because we're adding these sort of weird little class names like MA0, TTU, F6. But these are things that we pick up quite quickly as we start to use it more. And every time we use them, I'm going to explain what they do. But after a while, they just kind of click. And even if they don't click, you can always come back to the tachyons page, which has very clear documentation on how it all works. So a combination of the documentation, the components, seeing how things might be done, certain design patterns, as well as the gallery. So where it's being used in the wild, it's nice and straightforward to sort of figure things out. It's not straightforward, but life is made a lot easier for us. So I've just gone and written a bunch of stuff into the developer tools, which is all well and good, but if I refresh the page now, it's going to disappear. So I need to remember to write this stuff over into my HTML again. So what do we have on our hero content? We're going to make that white, and we're going to center the text. So I'll add some comments in here to say make the text white and center it. Then also I'm going to put a comment in here to say here we make the section, the hero, have a min height of 100 VH, cover background, center it, add flexbox, and make the content center vertically and horizontally. Cool, so on this H1, we had some class names there. What did we have? We had our hero heading. And with that, we are making it bold. Sorry, it's B rather than bold. Removing the margins, making it white. Actually, we'd already made it white, and making it uppercase. Here, we make it bold, have 0 margin, and uppercase letters. For our subheading, what are we going to do there? We're going to do pretty much the same thing again. So we're going to add a class, classes, and these classes are going to be hero, subhead. We're going to put a margin on the bottom of 6, so quite a big margin there. We'll remove the margin on the top. We will also make it uppercase, so text transform uppercase. And then lastly, with our date, let's go in. So we'll say P class. We're going to make the font size the 6, so 6th on the scale, like a very small font size there. We'll give this a class of date. Remove the margins, so margin all 0, uppercase, and then we're also going to use this tracked class. Now for the typographers amongst you, you will be used to the idea of when you have small uppercase text, you sometimes need to put some tracking onto it, so to actually increase the letter spacing between individual letters. So if we go into the docs, we have the white space here. Sorry, not white space, it is tracking. And we got a few options for that. So by default, uppercase lettering would look like that. If we add a class of tracked, it'll look like this. We can space it out even more, or we can tighten the tracking for big headline text as well. So we've got some little helpers in there, which we can use. So we're going to use this tracked class to add a bit of spacing between our letters. Perfect. So we haven't actually written any CSS yet. If I save this and see what I have, it has changed. And the reason we've lost a few things there is because my inspector lets me have a look. There we go. Our hero heading and our hero subhead currently don't have any styles in our CSS. So let's go in and do those. So what we want is to remove what we have here, and we're going to do hero heading and hero subhead. So hero heading, hero subhead. How big do we want to make those? Well, we want to make them 64 pixels. So font size 64 pixels. Remember to spell hero correctly there. And if we give this a refresh, this is looking pretty good. But one thing we can do actually on our hero heading here is to say margin top 0 and then margin bottom. Let's just give it a value of 2. So if we look at the spacing, where we have the margins, we've got to scroll down a bit to find those. You can see it works in units. So we have a little bit of space between our Hong Kong and our subhead, and we can achieve that with just a little bit of margin bottom. That's in there. So ever so subtle. We can even increase that to 3. And that's looking good. So currently this page typographically is not looking very good because we're using the default Times New Roman, I believe, if I inspect this. Yeah. So we're going to go in our next video, we're going to add our custom fonts for this, of which we have 3 different fonts. We'll see how we can convert those to web format and get them embedded on our page.